Into the synagogue. There's a service this morning. There happens to be no bar mitzvah. There will be some music for Musaf. They're bringing back the band. And in the first room, which is the Sher Lapati room, we have the Neshama Minyan this morning, a beautiful musical, spiritual minyan led by Nina and friends. And this morning she's talking about Jewish environmental ethics. And you're all invited to come and to enjoy that. And then following all of that, there's a very light lunch, which I hope you'll come and stay and eat. This coming week, College of Jewish Studies continues on Wednesday night. We started last week with a brief introduction to Jewish history, doing a survey of Jewish history this year. And our guest this week is Professor David Myers, who is Professor of Jewish History at UCLA and the newly appointed President of the Center for American Jewish History in New York City. Thank you so much. Just put them right here and we'll spread them around. All right, we have some chumashim here for everybody, okay? So everybody is invited on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. It's free and we serve really good cookies. So please come and join us for that session. Everybody good? Yeah? There's like 100 things going on in the shul, if I can remember them. I'm not very good at remembering anything anymore. Yeah, well, I want to pass them around, so we'll do that in just a second. I want to spare you guys the need to. Just you can. All right, who needs chumashim? We got Bibles here. Anybody need? Oops. I would throw it at you, but it's probably not wise, you know. Okay, there you go. No, take one in it, please. Okay. I don't know if you heard, but the Dodgers clinched the pennant. The Dodgers are in the World Series. We don't know who they're playing yet because the Astros. That's the short version. That's It'll either be the Yankees or the Astros. So we'll pray for the Dodgers. On November the 6th, we're doing it's a Monday night, we're doing our annual event with APAC, and our guest this year is Professor Gil Troy. Gil is a professor of American history at McGill University and a fellow of the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. I learned with Gil, he's a lovely guy, and he's been doing a lot of very interesting work. He's an expert on American-Israel diplomatic relations. So he'll talk about America and Israel and the world now, and a very, very excellent teacher. Okay, and on November 27th, if you just file it away someplace, we're going to do another one of our political programs, and this time we've welcomed three of the founders of the National Jewish Republican Coalition to talk to us about the philosophy of conservative politics in America and the future of the Republican Party, and have a good conversation about that. So that's where we are in terms of programs. There's lots more on the website. There's Mitzvah Day coming. My kid's getting married, all kinds of good things happening. So Mitzvah Day and my kid getting married are happening on the same day, but that's another whole problem. It's a mitzvah.
When's the Ofruf?
The Ofruf is the first Shabbos in November 4th. So come and celebrate my kid and we'll have lunch afterwards. I'm buying Yonah. Yeah, Yonah's getting married. Finally, Yonah's getting married. So, which is a good thing. Okay. Today's story is a very serious story. We're in the second Torah portion, but I want to begin at the beginning again. So I'd like to go back, if you would please, to page 10 in the Chumash. Got my notes here. Page 10 in the Chumash. And now, and I just want to trace the arc of the narrative, because the arc of the narrative is really what this is about. We begin with the God who looks into the universe and says, let there be light, and day after day creates a world, and at the end of that process of creation, God says, if you look at page 11, and God saw all that he had made and found it very good. Vayar Elohim et kol asher asa, everything that God made, v'hinei tov me'od. The creation begins good. It's what happens next that's complicated, because it begins good. And the sad story is, here's the arc of the narrative. If you go with me to page 34, Okay? As we finish that first Torah portion, here's the end of that Torah portion, right? On page 34, it's the 5th verse. And the Lord saw how great was man's wickedness on earth, and how every plan devised by his mind was nothing but evil all the time. Right? Vayar Adonai ki rabba ra'at ha'adam ba'aretz. So you start with this ra'ah, this notion of seeing. Before Vayar Elohim ki tov ma'od, God saw it was good. Now God sees ra'at ha'adam, the evil of man. There you go. Right on time. Monday night evil. It's Howard Cosell here in Dallas, Texas, as the Dallas Cowboys take on the Denver Broncos. Hola, ¿qué pasa? ¿Cómo estás? All right, Vayara Adonai ki rabata. God saw how terrible cell phones were. V'chol Yetzer machshavot libo. 3 really interesting words. Yetzer means the essence, the form. We have 2 phrases in rabbinic literature, Yetzer hatov and Yetzer hara. You have 2 impulses within. You have 2 impulses within. Yeah, well, either turn it off or take it outside and have your conversation, or throw it against the wall really hard. Call Yetzer machshavot. Machshavot mean thoughts. So Yetzer means your essence, your impulse, your personality. Machshavot means your thoughts. Libo, we translate libo as heart, and by heart, in American literature, we usually mean emotions, but libo for the Bible is mind. So God sees that there's something flawed within the essence of the human being. There's something in the motivations, in the structure of the human being that's wrong, right? Rak, ra, 2 interesting words. Rak only, ra, evil, kol hayom, all the time. All the time. So you start out with a human being who is blessed by God and endowed by God with virtue, with goodness. And you end up with this idea that God looks into the world and sees what? And what's interesting is it doesn't tell you what the sin was. That we'll come back to in a minute. I'm going to ask you what was the sin. But it doesn't say God saw this and this. God saw murder. God saw rape. God saw evil. What did God see? God saw something not the actual act. What did he see? The complete moral breakdown of human beings. The moral failure that became of human beings. This is a really sad story. I mean, the Bible is supposed to be this book of great faith. And it's a really sad story because you have this God who begins with ideals. I'm going to create this cool world. Watch this. Right? And the idea that he finishes the creation, and when God finishes with it, it's tov ma'od. But as soon as people get hold of it, what do you end up with? Rubbish. You end up with something that's destroyed. And there's a deep disappointment here. You have to feel that this is a story of divine disappointment. Right? And it's a very painful thing to read. Because you start out with the image of the creator, the image of the artist who wants to create something magnificent, and by the time it's done, it's turned into rubbish. When was that? V'yinachem Adonai ki asa et ha'adam ba'aretz. And God regretted having made people. What a horrible thought. God regretted having made people. Right? What parent regrets having brought a child into the world? And how sad that parent. In some ways like the ultimate expression of human disappointment would be the parent who says, I'm sorry I brought you into the world. I mean, just ultimate destruction of all that's good in the world. So I want you to feel that disappointment, because if you're not going to understand the next story unless you feel that deep sense of, my God, there's nothing redeemable about this creature, right? It doesn't say that, by the way, about elephants or snakes or sharks, because they're redeemable. I mean, a shark is a shark. He'll eat you for lunch, but he won't eat you because he's competing with you in business. A snake will eat you for lunch, or, an alligator. But there's something about human beings, and you get from, if you've been reading the Bible, as God is the cipher for the biblical author's deepest impulses. There's a deep sense of disappointment in life. Marty, please.
It seems like a manufactured defect. We don't know that humans did anything.
Yeah.
So it's something in God, in creation, it's something.
Yes, it's a manufacturer's defect, and today's Torah portion is the ultimate recall. Right? Bring it in, we'll give you a new one. We'll try again, which is going to be the story we're about to open. But before you get to that story, you've got to feel the pain, the disappointment, the rage of the artist who creates a piece of art that turns out to be the epitome of ugliness. Or the parent who raises a kid and says, God, what did I do wrong? I mean, there's just a terrible sense of disappointment here. Please.
But God gave us free will.
Yeah.
So I keep coming back to my annoyance with God. It's like,
Your annoyance with God?
here's God.
I hope it's not mutual. That's the only one.
If God made us as he knew, but
Yeah, right. But so every parent creates a child and says, I'm going to raise this kid in a warm, loving home and give him all the advantages, right? And careful. And so the question is, what do you do with...
he's making himself. He's recreating
Yeah,
himself.
right. But the creature, the creature that he creates, the offspring that he creates is so disappointing to him, right? And he thought, and see, because the presumption was that virtue is built into you, right? When God blesses people at the beginning, so put a finger here. We're going to come back here again. Come back to page, to the beginning again. So was it page 10 or 11, right? When God creates the human being, notice what he gives him, right? So on page 9, it's God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. So he possesses divinity. They will rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the cattle of the whole earth, all the creeping things. And God created man in his image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fertile and increase, fill the earth and master it. Rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, all the living creatures that creep on earth. I give you every seed-bearing plant that is on earth, every tree that is seed-bearing fruit. There'll be food for you. And to all the animals and the birds and everything that creeps up, I give you all the green plants. And God said it was so. And God saw it was good. What does he not give him? He doesn't give him any morality, right? Morality isn't part of the endowment, right? He tells him, fill the world, control the world, eat vegetables. That's what he tells him. Eat vegetables. So there's no moral instruction. So the presumption is that moral instruction is built in. You have an internal moral gyroscope, and you will do what is right. Right? You will do what is right. Right? There were these child rearing manuals when our kids were young. We used to read them all, and there were these very, very, progressive, as it were, child who said, never discipline the child. No, never discipline the child. You'll destroy his self-esteem. Let the child grow free, right? So, you're at the playground and some kid walks up and whacks your kid in the head and steals his dump truck or his snow shovel, and you say to the mother, your kid just hit my kid. So the mother walks up to the kid who assaulted your child and said, honey, are you okay? Are you feeling good about yourself? Right? And you say, your kid just hit my kid. Well, I don't discipline him. he'll find his own way morally. So you say to your kid, go hit him harder. No, you don't do that. That was a joke. You want to do that. You want to say, like, what's wrong with you people? No wonder the world's like the way it is. But there is this notion that virtue is built in. And it should express itself in the flowering of the human personality. Look, I told you, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the great Enlightenment philosopher of France, had this idea that human beings are born virtuous and it's only culture that turns them ugly. So that if you were teaching children, and Rousseau should have known because he had about 22 children out of wedlock, right? If you're teaching children, you don't get in their way. You simply provide the structures so that they can flower as the beautiful, moral, creative flowers that they are. Jean-Jacques Rousseau could believe that because he never worked in a Jewish summer camp. I spent many summers in a Jewish summer camp. I told you this the other night at the lecture. And I will tell you that the meanest, nastiest, most cruel, vicious creature on the face of the earth is not the great blue shark. It's not the anaconda of the Amazon. It's not the polar bear. It's not the California grizzly bear. It's not the Bengal tiger of India. It's a bunk of 11th grade girls. Because they choose one randomly on the first day of camp and then eat her to death over the course of a summer. Nancy and I worked at camp together, so we remember this. And and you say, like, why are you picking on this kid? She's a perfectly lovely kid. Oh, we're not. God discovers the same thing. Human beings are not naturally good. And if you put them in the world without moral guidance, you end up with this. You end up with a God who's terribly disappointed, right? Someone else had a hand up a moment ago. Yes, please.
That there was a basic flaw in his plan. When he planned man, he didn't give him all the goodies he needed to have.
Basic plan. I mean, the question is, what translate that out of theology and into life. Are we missing something? Is there some piece of us that's missing? Now, the prophet Jeremiah, we can look at this. The prophet Jeremiah had this idea that at a certain point in history, God is going to give up on human free will. And Jeremiah says, I'm going to take out of you the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And from now on, you will not have any choice in the matter. You will be good automatically. Now, the question is, would we be better what would human life be like if we didn't have those free choices, but goodness was the automatic software choice that you had, right? That we're all going to get self-driving cars in the next 10 years, right? No, seriously, it's all going to happen, and you'll get on the freeway, push a red button, and your car will drive you from here to Westwood over the hill at whatever speed is safe, not to smash into the car. I'm looking forward to this. I want to sit on the 405 and read the paper, and it'll be better because we won't hit each other. Now, you won't go as fast, and it'll be harder to get from here to there because you're going to have to, figure out how to tell the car where you want to go. But, the idea that you take away free will and you put in an automatic system that does it, but the question is, to what extent would that be human? If the child who hugs you and says, I love you, Grandma, is doing that because that's the way the child has been programmed and not as an act of giving of love, is that the same sort of act of love? It's a very interesting question, right? This is a very interesting, that's Jeremiah's vision, because Jeremiah, like Genesis, comes to the decision that human free will is the flaw. That free will is actually the flaw, right? Right? And then there's all these science fiction movies where the computers take over, because they decide that if we have free will, we'll blow ourselves up. Right? Yes, Sergio.
So God, when He created man, He created basically an amoral man because He couldn't know between good and bad.
Yeah.
He put it there.
Yeah.
Within His reach, but obviously it was amoral, not
it's interesting that
immoral or moral.
The fruit of the garden gives you knowledge of good and bad, but it doesn't give you the compulsion to do good.
Right.
Right? So you know what's good and bad, but you still make choices, right?
Right.
Right?
Okay.
the Coca-Cola company is in business? Explain this to me. Everybody knows that drinking that stuff is bad for you, right? And yet they sell millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of gallons of it. You know, so why, you know, think of all the things in the world that we know are bad for us and we do them anyway, right? So take a look at this again, right? We're on page 34. The Lord saw how great man was. Vayar Adonai ki rabata ra'at adam ba'aretz, right? And God regretted. Vayinachem Adonai ki asa et ha'adam ba'aretz, vayit atsev el libo. Yit atsev el libo means God's heart was saddened. This is an emotional response. This is the artist whose creation came out bad. I don't know how many of you, if you ever bake a cake and it just didn't come out right. Right? Or you create something, I don't know, you write a piece of music, and when you play it, it's just not right. Right? Yeah, and you say, there's a special sadness to the disappointed creator, the disappointed artist, right? You guys want to come in? We got room. Are you sure? Reserved seats. You sure? They're the same price. All right, if you like it out there in the loge box there, yeah. It's in the bleachers out there. And God said, "Vayomer Adonai emche et ha'adam." Emche, I'm going to erase, literally erase. I'm going to erase the man. I mean, it's as if you wrote something and I'm going to wipe it off the slate. That's the metaphor. Et asher barati, the man that I created, me'al pnei ha'adama, from the face of the earth. And then he says, I'm going to go farther than that. Me'adam ad behema, ad remesh va'ad of. Not just man, but man and beast, and creeping things and birds, because I regret creating everything. So the guilty one is man, but God's not satisfied just wiping out man. He's going to wipe out the whole thing. Everything's going to get wiped out. Now, why the beasts and the birds? I mean, what did birds do, right? Why the beasts and the birds and the bugs? Why they have to get wiped out? That's an interesting question, right? And at look at the very last line of the Torah portion. This is the last line of last week's Torah portion. V'noach matzachen be'enei Adonai. Noah, matzachen, found favor in God's eyes. Chen. Chen means favor, grace, love, attracted him. And what's interesting is the word chen and the word Noach are opposite each other. Right? Chen, Noach is nun chet, and chen is chet nun. So if you put them opposite on a mirror, they mirror each other, right? Looking at Noach, he saw Chen. And looking at Chen, he imagined Noach. And Noah is going to change the story. So instead of having the end of creation, we're going to have Act 2. Jerry.
If we presume God is logical, one logical answer for the animals and the birds and the crawling things is God made them to be under the dominion of man. If he takes out that top level of command, organization, and control, then he's made a chaotic world.
Yeah.
So they can't live without us.
Yeah. Okay. They can't live without us, without human stewardship. Interesting. Very interesting. But this is going to bother the commentators. Now, here's the question that's really going to bother the commentators. If you look into the Midrash, the rabbinic tradition, and to the medieval guys, what was the sin? What sin? I mean, so there's general sinfulness, great. But was there a particular sin that pushed God over the edge? And Rashi, the 11th century French commentator, who is thoroughly versed in the Midrash and whose job it is in his commentary is to bring us enough of that rabbinic tradition so that we can be fluent in it, he offers a very, very interesting point of view. And I didn't make this up for this week. I found it in the book. You want to come in? We got plenty of room. Okay. Go back a page. Look at page 33. There's a little story on page 33 which is very opaque, very weird story. It's obviously a fragment of a piece of mythology that the Bible felt compelled to include, but didn't really spell out what it was talking about. But Rashi's going to fasten on this as the answer to the question, one, what was the sin? And two, why did everything have to get wiped out? And here's the story. Vayehi kechal adam larov al pnei adama. When men began to increase on earth, vayoldu ubanot yaldu lahem, and they began to have daughters. No, this is very interesting. No, this is... They had daughters, right? Look at the next line. Vayeru b'nei Elohim et habanot ha'adam ki tovot hena. And the b'nei Elohim saw how good or how beautiful or how goodly were the daughters of human beings. Now, b'nei Elohim literally means the children of God, which probably refers to a snippet of mythology which was probably well known to the writers of this story, that in some sense the creatures of heaven came from heaven and cohabited with the daughters of men. Right? You have this in Greek mythology, for example, right? Hercules is Zeus's son through a female of right? Sorry?
The children with giants.
Well, we're coming to that. So you have this in Greek mythology and in other mythologies where heavenly beings come to earth and they have relations with the children of men, with human women, right? But B'nai Elohim is a very, very strange phrase. We'll come back to that, right? Vayikhu lahem nashim mikol asher bacharu, and they took wives from among those who pleased them. Okay? And then the Bible steps back and introduces another idea. The Lord said, "My breath shall not abide in man forever, since he too is flesh. Let the days allowed him be 120 years." And now back to our story. It was then and later on too that the Nephilim appeared on earth. Now, when your translator gives you a word like Nephilim and doesn't translate it, you say, So everybody go, good, it's good. Because it means he's not quite sure what it is. Now, what it is we know this now because we have records of ancient Near Eastern mythologies. And Nephilim were among these sort of half-god, half-human creatures that that ancient mythologies referred to. Sometimes they were giants, or they were ogres, or they were mythical creatures, okay? When the divine beings cohabited with the daughters of men who bore them offspring, these were the heroes of old, the men of renown. So what we have here is a snippet of what was once a great literature. A whole mythological literature of what happened when the children of heaven, the creatures of heaven, came to earth and stole the daughters of human beings. This mythological story, and the Nephilim, all of these mythical creatures were born. And once these Nephilim were in the world. If you saw the movie Noah, they have these giant rock guys. He was playing with the same idea. Okay, and then it says, God saw how great was the wickedness of man. Rashi, however, doesn't know ancient Near Eastern mythology. Rashi doesn't know anybody's mythology. Rashi just knows the Bible. So come back again with me, back to the beginning, 33, back to chapter 6. This is what Rashi does with this. Okay, this part's rated R, so if there's children here, they don't belong for a moment. Just for a moment. There are phrases in the book of Psalms where the phrase B'nai HaElohim doesn't mean mythical creatures or godlike creatures or angelic creatures. B'nai HaElohim means powerful men, the leaders of the community. So Rashi at that point puts in the word sarim, which means the princes or the powerful men, the royalty, the aristocracy. And he reads it this way. He says, when daughters were born into the world, right? The B'nai Elohim would see how tovot they were. And Rashi asks the question, if you read a little Hebrew, you can see the word tovot. It's 3 lines down, the second to the last word. It's missing a vav. It should be taf vav, right? Tet vav, tet, vet, vav, tet, tough. But it's missing a vav. And Rashi puts in the following. He says, there was a custom that on the first night of a marriage, before a husband would enter chuppah with his wife, the prince of the land would come and take her. This is a custom that, I read about this, I tried to read about this week. Hang on. This is a custom that has there is no actual historical evidence that it was actually practiced, but it occurs in literature all over Europe, all over medieval Europe, that in certain jurisdictions it was the right of the prince to have a young bride on the first night of her marriage before her husband would have her, because the prince had control of all of the women of the land. Okay, it's called noctis prima, something like that. What is it? That's what it's called. If you rightus signori. If you know literature, this is the plot of The Marriage of Figaro. If you know movies, this is the plot of Braveheart. Okay? And it's referred to here, and it's referred to in many legends and stories, although nobody has any historical evidence that it was actually done, but it was a memory that was kept in the world. So what is Rashi saying? What was the sin? The sin was that these powerful men came and took these women, especially lower status women. Aristocratic men would come and exert their power to take women. And why were they tovot? Because they were dressed for their chuppah. It was on their wedding night. And he could have her on her wedding night before her husband could be intimate with her. In other words, it was this rapacious sexuality. This rapacious sexuality where a prince would use his power to take the woman that he wanted, even though she was engaged to be married to another man. It was this rapacious sexuality of men who knew no bounds. There was no limit. There was no propriety in whichever woman he wanted, he could have. This rapacious form of sexuality, this rapacious form, and it's not sexuality based on love, it's not even sexuality based on lust, it's sexuality that is rooted in power. Male power over women's bodies. This is in Rashi this week.
Wow.
11th century France. I didn't make this up. And Harvey Weinstein is on the cover of the Jewish Journal. No, I'm not. So last night, I subscribed to the New Yorker magazine because it's a wonderful read. And last night, I got my New Yorker yesterday. It usually comes Shabbos. It came Friday for some reason. And it has in it the article by Ronan Farrow, he's the guy that wrote this story about Weinstein. I want you to read this article. And I want you to read it because it'll give a chill to you. Because what he describes in the article is, the article basically is please come in. We'll always find room. We got lots of room. Come in. There's a chair here, Come in. Thank you. Come in. Don't, just come in. There's always room for someone to learn Torah. Pharaoh in this article, this is in Rashi, and then I'm reading Rashi and I'm reading the New Yorker. So Pharaoh in this article presents, he goes through like 7 or 8 cases of actresses and models and performers who Harvey Weinstein forced himself upon. And he describes, and there's a pattern. Each one of them has the same pattern. And what he says at the end of the article, I put it down because I was shivering. He says at the end of the article, Weinstein didn't do this because he was attracted to these women even though they were spectacularly beautiful. The thing that made Harvey Weinstein so excited, the thing that stimulated him so sexually, was the moment when the woman panicked. When she saw there was no way out, that he was so powerful, physically powerful, a big man, and had such power over her career that she capitulated and performed whatever sex act he demanded of her. It wasn't the sex act he was after. It wasn't the beauty of this woman's body. It was his ability to control this woman. And then in the subsequent, afterwards, that these women, he asks the question, why did none of them come forward? Some of them signed non-disclosure agreements, and some of them were paid, and all of them were afraid of his ability to destroy their careers in show business. But he goes farther. He said, and he interviews a couple of them, and the interviews will just make you cry. There was such a sense of shame, such a sense of the destruction of spirit, such a sense of how could I do such a thing, that the woman herself couldn't bear the thought of repeating what happened to anybody. And then I read this, and there's Rashi saying that was the sin of the flood. The sin of the generation of the flood was men who used their power to force themselves upon women and to force women to do their bidding and to gain pleasure not from the sex act, not from the intimacy, not from even lust, but from the expression of power over a creature who has no choice. And says Rashi, that's the point at which God says, I'm destroying everything. I'm destroying everything I created, even the animals, because Rashi says when you introduce that level of immorality, that kind of rape, and he called it rape and idolatry, the worship of power, then you introduce something so destructive into the world that it destroys everything. That's the moment at which God, in utter rage, just says, screw it, forget it all. I'm destroying, I'm erasing all of being from the planet. That's the Ronan Pharaoh drasha on Rashi, and the Rashi drasha on, and as I'm reading this last night, I'm just, it's like, so Nina says, what are you reading? I said, I can't tell you. No, I swear to you, I said, I can't tell you, because if I tell you, you won't be able to sleep. I don't want you to go to, I love my wife. I don't want her to have nightmares. Yeah, it is so frightening. That's what I read. It's in the Rashi. It's in the 11th century Rashi. Right, Andy, go ahead. Andy and Andy. That's the great question, right? And that's exactly the question that Abraham's going to ask in 2 weeks. So you'll all come back in 2 weeks. Because in 2 weeks, that's precisely the question Abraham's going to ask God. Which means what? Which means that the memory of the flood is in Abraham's head, right? The memory of the flood, this idea that God has the capacity when God reaches a point of despair to wipe everything clean. And by the time you get to Abraham, you have a human being who says, no, that's not justice. I understand that's an expression of your despair. I understand that's an expression of your rage. I understand it where it comes from, but you have to be more discriminate in your application of force and power in the world, because that's not justice. That's Abraham's claim against God, right? You can't do to Sodom and Gomorrah what you did to the world in the time of the flood. I don't care how bad they were. And by the way, in the Midrashim on Sodom and Gomorrah, and if you insist, I'll bring them, you have similar stories. Remember the story, the angels who come to save Lot, the angels come and they're in the house, and the crowd comes and says, bring us these men so that we might know them. Rapacious sexuality, right? This is one of the sort of deep buried themes of the Bible. Certainly you didn't teach me this in Hebrew school, right? This idea that rapacious sexuality is a sin that God won't tolerate in the world, or to put it in less theological language, it's the sin that will destroy everything civilized in us. It's the sin that destroys everything civilized, because the notion that a woman can't sit with me, talk to me, be with me, and not fear that I'm going to use her. That fear corrodes everything civilized. Civilization begins when you have the invention of something called the gentleman. And what is a gentleman? A gentleman is a person who can say, it's nice to have you here, and she's not afraid of, well, she's afraid of me, but that she can see in my eyes that I respect her boundaries. I mean, and I'm not making this stuff up because of the Harvey Weinstein story. I found it in the Rashi, and this idea that that's civilization. So Abraham says to God, you can't do another flood number on that city. You have to be better than that. You have to be more just than that. And so that's the development of the better idea of justice. That's exactly the right question. All right, Rabbi. Okay, good. Someone over here had a... Yeah. Yeah, okay, we got lots of comments. Yes, David.
Why did or would God put the tree of knowledge in the garden in the first place? Because if that wasn't there, none of this would be happening, none of this would have happened. There would have been indefinite perfection. So what's the...
So take that, so give her the question. Why put a tree of knowledge in the garden altogether if you didn't want human beings making moral distinctions, right? Okay, so now take it and turn it the other way around. Take it and turn it the other way around, okay? Read it backwards for a second, okay? What does it mean to say? What is that story trying to say, right? We would all like to stay children our whole lives, wouldn't we? I think so. I think a great deal of American civilization is built on the idea that you can be a child. Las Vegas. I rest my case. Las Vegas is a place where grown-ups can go and pretend to still be children, right? No, it's structured in a certain way, but you go, this is a center of immaturity, juvenile pre-adolescent fantasy, right? So the notion is that we have to rebel against that circumstance in order to rise up and become grown-ups. It's not that, because he wanted us to eat from the tree, but it had to be an act of rebellion. Because if it wasn't an act of rebellion, if it had been here, I'm giving you more, then it would have been obedience. It has to be an act of rebellion because it has to be a breaking out. You have to say, me. You raise a 2-year-old and the kid looks at you one day and says, no! And one part of you says, oh God, this is the end, Why aren't you that sweet little baby in my arms anymore? The other arm, he said, good, he's growing up. Finally, he's growing up. He's becoming a person, you see? The Bible's notion is that moral maturity begins in an act of rebellion when you start to say, I'm in charge of me. It's me, it's mine. It's an act of individuation. And individuation is rebellion in a certain sense. That's what the Torah is. I think that's what the Torah is trying to say. Yes, please. Thank you. You're a very wise person.
In a different way. But Rashi said, and look at what's happening today with Feinstein, it's our feeling of morality that is fighting against what's happening. So it's not God that's eliminating everything. We are eliminating what he's standing for.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The only problem that I'm having with and this is not Torah, so it's not fair for me to get into this now, but at least it's not political. The only problem I'm having is that it's not Harvey Weinstein. It's the whole entertainment industry, and it's the whole culture. It's the whole culture. What? I see that. So, Sergio, you are expressing the pre-flood despair of the Lord. You can't undo that.
No. You are expressing it. I said you cannot do that. You're going to say it's everybody. It is part of the culture. It's not everybody.
Say all over.
I think it's
not everybody. It's not all the time.
I was teaching a class, and and after the class, one of my students came to me and said, I want to point out to you one of the ways that you talk to the women in the class. And she pointed out a pattern of my responses. And I said, you're absolutely right, and I apologize. And I think of myself as a feminist. I fought for my wife to become a rabbi, and I had a mother and a daughter who were very incredibly strong people. And yet I fell into a pattern of speech that she found subtly demeaning. She said, you're not hurting me, she said, but I want you to notice that the way you talk to the women is different than the way you talk to the men. And when she pointed it out to me, I sat down and said, God, you're right. I'm sorry. I never, next time I do that, throw a shoe at me. Right? Because I think that we are doing this, but in many subtle ways. Thank God you're not, none of us, except for Harvey, are doing that. But the expression of masculine power over women, the demeaning of women's humanity, is something that we're just becoming, look, it's only been 2-3 generations of feminism. We're just slowly becoming aware of it, right? And slowly you become aware of it, you know, and while certain people make fun of codes of political correctness, sometimes that's necessary to help us become aware of how our speech patterns and our behavior patterns express power over others and demean others in ways that we don't even notice. And so that's to me the tshuva of the Harvey Weinstein story is he's going to go wherever he's going to go, to jail or to hell, either way, whichever first, right? But I'm more worried about the rest of us. I mean, in what way am I a little bit like that?
Okay.
That's what I'm worried about, and you know, and how do I become aware of that stuff and push back?
Talk to my daughter. She's aware of every little nuance.
Well, good. No, but that's good. I don't want my daughter to become engulfed in victimization. But on the other hand, I want her to become strong enough to say, stop calling me a girl, right? Stop doing, and I told my student I really appreciated her forthrightness, because it takes a lot of courage to go up to your professor and say, you know, you're doing this, and I appreciated it because I'm trying. I mean, I said to her, I'm trying. She said, I know you're trying. So it was a nice moment of solidarity. All right, let's come back to the text. I know you all want to talk, and I do too. So what happened? So turn the page. We're going to get to the flood. Turn to page 41. Ready? So here's the flood. This is the line of Noach, ish tzaddik tamim haya b'dorotav. Noah ish tzaddik, righteous man, haya b'dorotav. So the commentators in Midrash wants to know, haya b'dorotav, he was a tzaddik in his time. He was a tzaddik in his time. Is that l'shevach or l'gnai? And there's 2 different ways of reading it. Rashi points this out. You could say that in his age of rotten people, this man was a tzaddik, so if you were to transplant him to a better age, he would be a ganza tzaddik, a bigger tzaddik, right? Because if you can be righteous in Las Vegas, right, in Reseda, you would be really righteous. You get it, right?
Yeah.
Salt Lake City, you'd be really righteous, right? The other way is l'gnai, which is the negative, which is to say, he wasn't that righteous, but compared to the people in his day, he was the most righteous of the unrighteous people. Because unlike everybody else in his day, he could follow directions. And that's going to be his righteousness. See, unlike Abraham, who God is going to say, I'm going to wipe out Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham says, you can't do that. This is a very unique moral personality. Like the kid who tells me that I'm demeaning her when I use my language. To say to authority, to someone who has power over you, you can't do that, takes some guts. Right? Here you get Noah, who doesn't have that level of morality, but sufficient morality to follow directions, to build an ark. Right? And so it says, the earth became corrupt before God, the earth was filled with lawlessness. The Hebrew word for lawlessness is, you'll appreciate this, Hamas. Okay? I didn't make that up either. I don't make anything up. It's in the Bible. It's right here. V'timalei haaretz Hamas. The biblical word for the chaos, the moral chaos that brought the world down is Hamas, right? And God saw for the earth, God saw all that was corrupt. And God said, I've decided to put an end to flesh. I'm going to destroy them with the earth. Go make yourself an ark. If you want to see it, by the way, they built it in Tennessee. These guys built this ark. The ark. They did. There's an amusement park in Tennessee now that has a life-size ark, and it has robotic animals inside. You can go and do this, right? And he gives him the whole shtick about how he's supposed to build it, right? And then comes and he brings the animals into the ark, and then comes the flood. We're going to go through this quickly because we're running out of time, and we still have an awful lot of righteousness to discover, right? And now, turn to, okay. So look at page 47, it all comes to an end, right? At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark and sent out a raven. And what happens? Right? And then he sent out a dove. The dove could not find a resting place for its foot. I'm on 47 at the bottom, right? So he took it with him in the ark, and then he waited another 7 days and sent out another dove from the ark, and the dove came back. I'm on page 48 at the top. And in its bill was a plucked off olive leaf. And Noah knew that the waters had decreased on the earth, and he waited still another 7 days and sent another dove forth, and it did not return. In the 601st year, the first month of the year, the first of the month, Rosh Chodesh, which is today, the waters began to dry from the earth. Noah removed the covering of the ark. He saw that the surface of the ground was drying. And in the second month, the earth was dry. Now, what should it say next? The earth was dry. He came out. But look at what it says next. God spoke to Moses and said, come out of the ark. Why didn't he just come out on his own? Noah, sorry. What'd I say? Moses. Yeah, Moses. That's another ark story, but we'll get to that. Why doesn't he come out on his own? Why doesn't, look, you've been in this ark with all these animals. It cannot smell good in there. The windows are closed because of the rain. You have all these animals. Have you ever been in the presence of elephants? Kangaroos, giraffes? Have you ever met my dog? Right? You probably have. Wouldn't you think that the very moment he could get the heck out of there, he would be out of there? Why does he need to be told to come out of the ark?
He was on a mission.
No, he could say that he was on a mission. He was waiting for the commander to tell him his orders. Because that's his morality. His morality is, I do what you tell me to do. That could be. You're right. Give me another reason.
Fear of the unknown.
Yes. I like it in there. The ark may not have been comfortable, and it may not have smelled good. But this becomes my world. This becomes my world. And to step out into this new... What the hell is out there? I mean, what survived and what didn't survive? Who survived? What if one of the people from before survived? That was the movie, right? What would that be like? What? Sometimes it's better to be in the ark with all those smelly elephants than in a world you don't know anything about, right? You get this sense of a man. There's something about Noah we're learning. Very little. We know very little about Noah. We just know what he does. But now you're gonna just begin to sense something. There's something profoundly fearful here. What if? What if? So he says, come out of the ark, together with your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives, and bring out every living thing of flesh that's with you, birds, animal, everything that creeps on the earth. Now, okay, how was Noah to come out of the ark? I want you to read this carefully with me, because this is important, right? God says to him, on page 48, verse 17, right? Or verse 16. Come out of the ark, together with your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives. You brought the animals in how? 2 by 2, male and female. I want you to come out 2 by 2, male and female. Watch how Noah comes out, right? So Noah came out together with his sons, his wives, and his sons' wives. What can that mean? God says, I want you to come out with your wife and your sons, and they come out with their wives. 2 by 2. Noah comes out of the ark with his sons, and the wives are behind. Uh-oh. Again. He didn't get it. Again. This, like, what? Like, wait a minute. I mean, this one piece of it is he didn't follow the instruction. 2 is he's asserting priority over the women. Men are asserting priority over the women. 3rd, you could go farther than this. A person who experiences a trauma has a very difficult time experiencing intimacy. And he's just experienced the mother of all trauma, right? He stood on the bridge of that deck and watched the whole world get destroyed. And afterwards, he couldn't look at his wife. He couldn't find intimacy with her. He couldn't imagine new life beginning because of the amount of death that he witnessed. It's something it's just a little teeny detail. I know I'm reading way too much into it, but it's just a kind of little detail that makes you say, and then all the animals come out. Okay? Go ahead, Andy.
Could you say, read it differently and say that he was protecting them?
All right, see, you're a nicer person than me. You're a nicer person than me, yeah.
He actually does it in a different order than he was told to do it.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm kind of with him a little bit, right? It's the forward scouts out in the hospital.
Okay, so you guys are much nicer than me. I'm judgmental, and you're saying maybe he's afraid of what's out there, so he and his sons will go out first and make sure that it's safe, and then we'll allow the women folk to come out. Okay, fine. I accept the invitation. Karen?
I think it's more to do with what you said about why he didn't come out in the first place. And it has to do with disrupting what exists and why speaking up to what happens is so disruptive. I don't know if you remember, a long time ago, you convened a panel, or not a panel, a group of people who work in the Hollywood industry.
Yeah.
To talk about the implications of being in the industry and Jewish, and I spoke very near the beginning, and what I said is, I've been accosted by these powerful men, executives and directors, and I guess it wasn't what that was supposed to be about, I don't know, but it was like I had let a very bad smell out in the room, and there was no response to what I said, and so the experience of breaking silence is so powerful and so disruptive. And in the same way that Noah chose to stay in the familiar, which was stinky and horrible, because when you speak out, it changes the fabric, it rips the fabric, and society is based on agreements. It creates fabric. And it works for a time, and then we have a realization, and we go up, and the fabric's ripped, and there's a readjustment. So I think you're not over-interpreting this.
Wow, thank you. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry. All right, let's see what happens. We're going to finish this. Ready? Noah built an altar to the Lord. Religion for the Bible is a natural impulse. You go through a trauma, you give a bracha, right? It's a natural, no one told him to do this. No one told him how to do this. But it's a natural impulse in the same way that it was for Cain last week, right? And taking a very pure animal and pure bird, he offered burnt offerings on the altar. The Lord smelled the pleasing odor. So somehow God is reminded of people in the world when he smells this. And he says, and it's only after he smells the odor, not before. In other words, it's only after he sees this act of religiosity that now he comes to a different conclusion. And what's the new conclusion? Never again will I doom the earth because of man, since the devising of man's minds are evil from his youth, nor will I ever again destroy every living being as I have done. Now that's an interesting, the structure of that speech is very interesting, right? Never again will I doom man because the earth because of man. We say, well, that's good, right? But it's not because of what you think. You would hope that it would be because man has the capacity for goodness. Because look, here is this man Noah who did what I told him to do, saved life on the planet, and now offers me worship, right? But that's not what God says. What does God say? Because now I realize something. What do I realize? Well, because man, this is how man is. This is how man is. And so destroying the world on his because of him, that's not going to give us a world, right? But I'm going to do something different. Now watch what he does that's different, right? So first we have this poem. So long as earth endures, seed time and harvest time, day and night, cold and heat shall not cease. And now look at the next page. The next page introduces a whole new idea. If I know that man has got this capacity for evil, But I also know that he has a capacity for good, for reverence. If I know that he is morally uncreated in that way, he is a morally self-creating creature. He's a creature endowed with choice who is always creating his own moral destiny. But I know that if I just leave him to his own devisings, that's the direction he's going to go. So I'm going to have to make an adjustment in creation. And the adjustment in creation is something called Brit, covenant. Listen, God blessed Noah and his sons and said, "Be fertile and increase and fill the earth." Does that sound familiar? That's exactly the same blessing as Adam. "The fear and dread of you shall be upon all the beasts of the earth, and upon the birds of the sky, and everything which the earth is astir, upon all the fish of the sea, they are given to your hand." That's different. Before, you were to rule them, you were to protect them, you were to control them, but they're not going to fear you. This is a new statement, right? "Every creature that lives shall be yours to eat." What was the rule before? You only eat, not even vegetables, by the way, you only eat fruit. Fruit. What's that mean, eating fruit and eating vegetables? You eat an apple off the tree is there. You eat an asparagus, you've pulled up the plant. In other words, the original vision of Eden was that nothing dies so that other things live. Now, we know that man has this need in him to destroy. So we're going to let him have enough of it. We're going to sublimate it, said Freud. We're going to let him have enough of it to satisfy him, but we're going to control it. You can eat what you want. Anything you want, except what? "Every creature that lives you shall eat, as with the green grass, I give all of these to you. You must not, however, eat flesh with its life blood." Why not? What is blood? Life. You may eat the animal to satisfy your nutritional needs. You may even eat the animal to satisfy your bloodlust. But I'm not going to let you think that you own the life of that animal. I own the life of that animal. You did not create the animal. You did not initiate that animal's life. You don't control the life. It's not yours. I'm giving it to you as a gift. Remember that. So blood may not be eaten, because blood is the symbol of life, because blood is always moving through the creature. So blood has to be taken out of the meat before you eat it, because blood is a symbol of life and you don't control the life of the animal. But not just the blood of the animal, and not just the life of the animal, right? What else? Now listen, watch the way this builds upon itself, right? "You must not, however, eat flesh with its lifeblood in it, but for your own lifeblood I will require a reckoning. I will require it of every beast, of every man too. I will require a reckoning for human life of every man for that of his fellow man." The reason you can't eat blood is because from now on, anyone who takes the life of another has to report back is accountable to me, says God. You are accountable for the life of every creature. You're accountable, and watch the way, now it moves, the Torah puts a little drasha in itself, a little midrash, the Torah adds right there, a little poem. See the poem there? The poem is a midrash on what we just read. We read the legal code. For the blood of every creature you must give a reckoning. For the blood of every man you must give a reckoning. No one gets away with murder. And now you get a little poem, and the poem adds an idea. Shofech dam ha'adam, ba'adam damo yishafech. Isn't that beautiful? Let's do it again. Shofech dam ha'adam, ba'adam damo yishafech, ki b'tselem Elokim asa et ha'adam. The first is this little couplet that says that for the blood of, if a man spills another man's blood, his blood will be spilled. And then the second gives you the midrash. Why? Ki b'tselem Elokim asa et Adonai. Et Adam. Et asa et Adam. Every creature, every man, every human being is created in the tselem Elokim. Now, there's a big difference here. We knew that from before, right? In Genesis, we know that the human being is created in the image of God, right? You know that you're created in the image of God because Genesis told you that in the beginning.